Blackford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is a pleasure to follow the Leader of the House. I should remind him that Lord Cooper in the Court of Session said that parliamentary sovereignty is a purely English concept that has no counterpart in Scottish constitutional history. In Scotland, the people are sovereign, and that, of course, will be a matter of importance as the people of Scotland decide what their future will be. I have to say, Mr Speaker, that I'm rather surprised by the right honourable gentleman, who has always been a student of the rights of this House, because the harsh reality is the reason that we're in the situation that Parliament has been prorogued is because the Prime Minister has instructed three stooges to go to Balmoral to give an instruction to the Queen to shut this place down. And for all these pronouncements that this is normal, it most certainly is not normal for Parliament to be prorogued for 5 weeks. And we know the simple reason is because the government is running away from the powers and responsibilities that this House has. It is shameful, it is disgraceful, and in that regard I am deeply honoured and privileged to endorse the motion in the name of the member for West Dorset. Mr Speaker, today the Scottish Government has launched an ambitious programme for government aimed at tackling climate change, building a fairer economy, reducing inequality and improving the lives of citizens across Scotland. Mr Speaker, a government getting on with its day job. 12 years into government, yet still focused on making life better for those in Scotland. But while government in Holyrood is stepping up to meet the challenges facing both Scotland and the world, Westminster is quite literally shutting down. There is very much a tale of two governments. While the SNP is doing everything here and in Edinburgh to move Scotland forward, the threat to our economy and society from the right-wing Brexiteer cabal occupying Downing Street cannot be mitigated away. Mr Speaker, they will be stopped. A sham is what reports say of the Prime Minister's advisers have called his EU negotiation strategy. Running down the clock is what the Telegraph is reporting those close to the Prime Minister say his strategy is. A complete fantasy, reports say the Attorney-General advising the Prime Minister of his approach to the backstop. Mr Speaker, the tall tales of this Prime Minister are being exposed by the media by the minute. Sources are exposing the smoke and mirrors behind those playing games in Number 10. Does the Prime Minister think this is a game? If so, it is a very, very dangerous game. Make no mistake, the Prime Minister is acting like a dictator, shutting down Parliament, ripping up democracy and silencing the people. I give way.
Right honourable gentleman for giving way, and he's making some very strong points. Would he agree with me that if the government was serious about negotiating and there were serious negotiations going on, then the negotiation team wouldn't have been cut to a quarter of the size of what it was under the previous Prime Minister, and you wouldn't have meetings going on where the chief negotiator is saying that the rationale for talking to the Brexit team in the EU is domestic political handling?
My honourable friend is absolutely correct. It is a complete sham to say that negotiations are taking place. This is simply a government that is driving us towards no deal, and Parliament, thankfully, is standing up for its rights. The Prime Minister seems to have forgotten in this place we have been elected to represent the will of our constituents, and we on these benches have been elected to serve the people of Scotland. The people of Scotland who have overwhelmingly voted to remain in the European Union. Yet this Prime Minister, by proroguing Parliament, has decided to ignore the will of the Scottish people, sideline their interests and silence their voices. And I say to the Scottish Conservative members, don't stab Scotland in the back tonight. Stand together with us. For once, stand up for Scotland's interests. While the Prime Minister clearly thinks he can do whatever he wants with Scotland and get away with it, the SNP is here today to tell him that we aren't having it. Since coming to office, the Prime Minister has not given Parliament the opportunity to debate the constitutional crisis facing these islands. And despite Parliament previously ruling out leaving on a no-deal basis, the Prime Minister is pedalling us towards the cliff edge, risking a no-deal Brexit, risking jobs, risking food and medicine supplies. The population of the United Kingdom being threatened by this government. I'll give way first to...
Very grateful, Chairman. The first observation I have about this government, it's amazing how much they're enthralled to the date given to them by Donald Tusk of the 31st of October. It's now become sacrosanct for Brexiteers, that EU date. But the other thing that strikes me about this government is they're looking to have a jingoistic pre-hard Brexit election. But they're fearing a post-Brexit election when there are empty shelves and lacks of medicines, because a lack of food on the shelves and a lack of medicines do not election victories make, and they will be decimated after they do the damage. So they want to cut and run and see if they can get over the line before they do the damage.
My honourable friend is correct, and the responsibility that this House has is to make sure that we don't have the catastrophe of a no-deal Brexit, to protect us from that risk. And yes, we want an election, but we want an election safe in the knowledge that we've protected our citizens from a no-deal Brexit. That is the right thing to do. And let's remind ourselves that the Prime Minister hasn't been elected by the people. He's been put in power by Conservative members. He should put himself in front of the people. But let's, in the first case, work together, work collectively to remove that cliff edge of the 31st of October.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Does he recall very clearly, as I do, that on the 6th of April 2016 we were told by the current Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster that when the day after we vote to leave the EU, we will hold all the cards? Does that not simply show that this government is being run by a hopeless, naive group of fantasists?
I have to say, it grieves me to see what has taken place, because in effect what has happened with the election of the Prime Minister, that we've had the Vote Leave campaign that now runs the government. And the harsh reality is that Conservatives sitting on the back benches that are prepared to put our national interests before party interests are going to be forced out their party. What has happened, Mr Speaker, is that the Tory party have been taken over by a cult, and that does nothing, absolutely nothing, for our democracy.
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman. He's completely right that Scotland would be harmed by the no deal, just as my constituents in Nottingham would be harmed by no deal. He's absolutely right to say that this bill is required as an insurance policy against that no deal. But would he also agree that anything that dissolves Parliament before the 31st of October, whether it is through prorogation or a jingoistic election, as the Honourable Gentleman from Nahill and Nar suggested, would put at risk our constituents, because there just is not the time to put all the legislation, the preparations in place, that insurance policy, before the 31st of October.
I think my honourable friend is right to signify that we are facing a constitutional crisis. And I want to applaud members of Parliament right across this House that have worked together over the course of the last few weeks collectively, because we understand the risk that there is to our economy. We understand the risk that there is to our communities. And thank goodness that members of Parliament have shown that desire to work across the House. And we in the SNP have made it clear that we will work with everyone else. We will make sure that we remove that cliff edge. We have done that consistently ever since 2016. We want an election, but we want an election where we can get to that safe landing place, that we have that no deal taken off the table at the 31st of October. But I say this, and no way do I mean it as a threat to anyone in this House. The people of Scotland deserve the right to be able to determine their own future. We cannot allow ourselves to be taken out of the European Union against our will. We have a mandate from the 2016 Scottish election to deliver a referendum for the people of Scotland. And it is absolutely right that the people of my country that want to remain as a European nation should have that choice. And the Prime Minister and his Brexiteer cohorts are not going to drive Scotland out of the European Union against our will. I'll give way one more time.
I thank the right honourable member for giving way. Does he, like me, feel somewhat disrespected tonight by the contribution of the Leader of the House, who's disrespected our Speaker and his decisions, and everybody who has supported this motion. I'm proud to have my name on here. Very proud to stand with people who are willing to put country before party, country before self. I wasn't sent here by my constituents to make them poorer, to put their jobs at risk and their health care. And I think that's our overriding priority, that we are here to stop a no-deal Brexit. This isn't about whether we're Remainers or Brexiteers. Many people who voted for Brexit would continue to do so, but not for a no-deal Brexit. I believe there is no majority in the country or in this House for a no-deal Brexit, which is a disaster for the people of this country, of all 4 nations.
I think the Honourable Lady makes a very passionate case, and we must reflect on what is in the Yellowhammer document. It is not made up. It is not anybody on this side of the House. It is the government that recognises the risks that there are to the people of the United Kingdom. When you have a government that is telling us that there is a potential risk to food supplies, when you have a government that is telling us that there is a risk to medical supplies, for those in particular that need epilepsy drugs, and good grief, contained within the document, it talks about a limited risk to water supplies for hundreds of thousands of people. Just think about this. Think about a government that's telling the people of the United Kingdom that we cannot guarantee that you're going to have a water supply. What on earth are we doing? Mr. Speaker, the nub of this is that this is about ideology, and however people voted in the Brexit referendum, they certainly didn't vote for this. And when you consider that the Treasury published a document last year that showed that a no-deal Brexit could reduce GDP over a 15-year period by something close to 10%. Just dwell on this. You're talking about an impact on the economy that's 4 times greater than the economic crisis of 2008, the economic crisis that ushered in a decade of austerity. It is the height of irresponsibility for any politician to think that we should be supporting no deal, putting constituents on the dole. Mr. Speaker, unemployment is never a price worth paying. But the government are prepared to put the people of the United Kingdom on the dole. We will not sit back and allow that to happen. One last time and then I'll make progress.
Right, Honourable Gentleman for giving way. He's making a very passionate case as to why no deal will be such a disaster. Does he agree with me that we have to, once and for all, dispense with this notion that it's some bargaining chip in these negotiations? Shooting yourself in the foot because you don't get what you want is not a negotiating position.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman, and he's absolutely correct. It is delusional, and they should start telling the truth to people. There will be no... One last time.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, but does he agree with me that what we hear from Europe is there isn't actually any proposal on the table from the government anyway? So there has been no serious negotiation to get a deal, and it's all literally a fairy tale and a sham.
Well, I don't know what the Prime Minister believes, but he was asked several times today by members in this House to tell us what proposition that the government's making. There is none. It's a sham. This is a government that's heading us towards the cliff edge of a no deal. That is the reality. Mr. Speaker, the deepening of the democratic deficit under the Prime Minister is despicable. This decision is an outrageous assault on basic democratic principles. And yet the Prime Minister and his cronies will argue that this is normal. A suspension, he argues, is quite right and proper. What ridiculousness. Now, I know the Prime Minister has never been one to deal in facts. But let me make it clear for members. In the last 40 years, Parliament has never been prorogued for longer than 3 weeks. Mr. Speaker, in most cases, it has been prorogued for only a week or less. To try and argue that 5 weeks is normal, if we're being polite, is disingenuous. So, Mr. Speaker, the reason that we are here today, why we want, for a better phrase, are taking back control of the order paper, we are doing this on a cross-party basis to stop the Prime Minister from running down the clock and obstructing the right of our MPs, our democratic right, to debate to vote and to represent the will of the people that sent us to this place. This shameful act from the Prime Minister is because he knows there is no majority here for a no-deal Brexit, because he knows there is no support from the public for a no-deal Brexit, because he knows what we all know: a no-deal Brexit is catastrophic for the lives of citizens across these islands. Just in office, and the Prime Minister is toying with our democratic processes. Ruth Fox, Director of the Hansard Society, said it was an affront to parliamentary democracy. And why, Mr Speaker? Because he, the Prime Minister, wants things his own way and at any cost. The real reason he can't bear for Parliament to sit and debate is because he knows he does not have the majority to support his disastrous plans to destroy our economy with a no-deal Brexit. What an embarrassment to parliamentary democracy. Well, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister cannot stop MPs doing their jobs. We will be heard, and democracy must be respected. Just last week, I was proud that my party signed a declaration alongside MPs across party in Church House, warning the government, and I quote, "Any attempt to prevent Parliament from sitting, to force through a no-deal Brexit, will be met by strong and widespread democratic resistance." Has the Prime Minister still not listened? Even today, a group of cross-party politicians are in Edinburgh for a full hearing of the Court of Session, attempting to prevent the Prime Minister from proroguing Parliament. My honourable colleague, the member for Edinburgh South West, has already called on the Prime Minister to swear on oath his reason for the prorogation of Parliament. Yes. Will the Prime Minister do so? Well, yeah, I think we know the answer to that. We also have a group of experts in constitutional law, human rights and justice writing in the Times, arguing that the recent decision to prorogue Parliament sets a dangerous precedent and furthermore is incompatible with executive accountability to Parliament as prescribed by the Constitution. Has the Prime Minister no shame? No. This is a blind power grab, showing total arrogance and contempt for the electorate. Instead of giving the people a new Prime Minister listening to their wishes, the Prime Minister has robbed the people of all power. What does this mean for this Prime Minister or a future Prime Minister shutting down Parliament on a whim? For us from Scotland, what protection do we have if any UK Prime Minister sought to shut down the Scottish Parliament? We need to protect our Parliament from this Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, it is clear that this House is not supportive of the Prime Minister's actions. This emergency debate is crucial as MPs today need to carve a way forward to allow emergency legislation against no deal to be passed. The cross-party bill seeks to ensure that the UK will not leave the EU without a deal unless Parliament consents to such an outcome. It will also require the Prime Minister then to extend Article 50. This is a crucial step to prevent a catastrophic no deal, to protect our economy and our communities. This is how we can come together to avoid a no-deal Brexit and protect the interests of citizens across these islands. And, Mr Speaker, fundamentally to protect not simply the rights of Parliament or parliamentarians, but the rights of the people. The denial of Parliament having its say denies people in Scotland and across the UK their say against a no-deal Brexit. We in the SNP cannot countenance that. I urge members, unite to stop a no-deal Brexit, to stop this Prime Minister, this dictatorship, and to restore democracy. Tonight, Mr Speaker, it is our turn to take back control. Tonight, the Prime Minister is going to be stopped in his tracks. The Prime Minister has tried to rob the people of their power. Now it's our time to rob him of his.
Order. After we have heard from the Father of the House, whom I intend shall speak next, it will be necessary for there to be a time limit on backbench speeches imposed by me in the name of trying to accommodate the maximum number of colleagues in this important debate. Mr Kenneth Clark.